People often ask me, what's it like to play a SUDA51 game? And I thought, and I pondered, and I formulated a response to that question, just in time for my review of his most famous game to date, No More Heroes. Let's begin. To play a SUDA51 game is like sitting in a community college creative writing class where that one weird guy who could never clearly organize his thoughts has to present to the class. He whips out some sort of postmodernist prose that he wrote the night before after praying to the altar of Franz Kafka, Takashi Miike, and Morrissey for inspiration. The document he brought with him could only be described as a writ of unfettered madness. He stands up from his chair, still holding onto his desk at first, as to have some sort of comforting pillar to ground him in reality. He slowly saunters his way through the opening lines that he borrowed from a movie that he watched ad nauseum, only changing a couple of words to mask their origins. But some of the audience members are clever enough to pick up on the sources he was plagiarizing. The further he gets into his utterances, he begins to step away from his desk, releasing his grip on it and building up an unearned confidence that surfaces in his voice with each step further into the center of the room. He's standing there now, in the middle of the room, surrounded by a group of strangers that only showed up for an elective credit and hosted by a 3-time published author that is contractually obligated to just sit there and listen on as memories of his youthful splendor are being erased in order to make room for diatribes about professional wrestling, political corruption, and a skosh of dick jokes. There stands a middle-aged man bellowing out a cornucopia of his influences derived in a rhythmic staccato with an occasional scream thrown in to place a weird emphasis on untypical words that hold a great importance to him and him alone. The class is looking on at the man, staring him down as if he were some sort of alien that was brought down to Earth, given very little prep time to learn about our foreign culture, and then forced to entertain them in a manner they're familiar with or face certain death. He prattles on, reading the nearly illegible pencil scrawls recited from the back of a sheet of misshapen paper that he fished out of his film class's recycling bin. On the other side of the paper was an advertisement for the college blood drive, which for some unknown reason he included in his recital. All eyes were on this man, unbroken gazes, with each warm body in the room collectively trying to solve the divine puzzle the universe had presented them. Was there a pair of spectral legs floating over the college, placed there by some god of trickery, that one day spread wide open and contracted and slid this orphaned abomination into this very building? Who or what could they hold accountable for the person standing in the center of the classroom wearing a silk open button shirt with anime dragons on it, that slightly covered another shirt that displayed an obscure German expressionist film that he had custom printed online the week before? Did the answer lie in the number of ceiling tiles or fiber threads in the carpet below? Certainly, the answer was not to be found in the retina of that man's eyes. Look away. Somewhere down along the lines, the man lost his place during the reading. He paused and began scanning the crumpled paper to find out where he left off, as the audience was left hanging on his every whispered murmur. The old man cleared his throat, trying to buy some time until he could remember the beat he had set for himself. He repeats a section that he had already read before. He did this a couple of times to try and get that rhythm back on track, but he never did. The closer and closer he got to the finale, the louder his voice raised, until it ended up echoing off the walls, which created an indecipherable symphony of noise. Then the man halted, and he displaced himself from his work for a moment to address the classroom directly. He offered them an explanation, but no apology. As he stated, "I couldn't decide on how to end this one, so I'm just gonna read a list of ideas I had for the ending." He then began to read the endings he had written down like a shopping list of cool shit that he wanted to pick up, but couldn't afford to due to being on a strict budget. In this one ending, an assassin baby crawls into a mech that's filled by titty milk that he collected from the breast of Brahma. The baby flies up into space and kicks the moon into a server farm down on Earth that hosted an evil AI that's also the love interest of the story. He reads on and on as the audience grows tired, until he comes to an unnatural stop, teasing them with the promise of future work to come. The professor of this class is straight up bewildered, but he wants to maintain an air of professionalism by feigning understanding and reciting the few sparse passages he was able to recall, but never once offering up corrections or asking the man to elaborate a little. This was in part due to consideration for the remaining class time, and partially due to a newly developed fear for his own well-being. It was a desperate act of self-preservation to defuse the human bomb man that was set to potentially go off if the wrong wire was cut. Metaphorically speaking, of course. He wasn't alone though, because no one in class wanted to offer up any critiques neither. They instead sat in a silent kind of awe of the bold display of schizoid ramblings that they passively witnessed during their collective journey to earn their 3 community college credit hours. The room fell silent, and the students looked around at each other, trying to send out some sort of nonverbal SOS, and come to a silent vote to decide the appropriate response to this uncomfortable shared experience they were going through. They had to make a choice. Should they clap at the man, acknowledging the surreal brilliance of his presentation? Should they gush praise for his bold delivery? How about laughing at the fart the man let out before he took his seat? Or should they call the police? That concerned feeling that I have deep down inside when I walk away from a SUDA51 game. Well, it's sorta like that story I told you. The end.